Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here, joined by Melissa Griffith. Melissa, how are you on this fine day?
It's a great day to be alive, so I'm living my best life ever. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, and I'm trying to pick up on your tone there. Are you like how much of that was genuine? How much of that was inflected with a tinge of irony? I don't know.
It's hard, right? Because I don't mean to be ironic or sarcastic, but yeah, no, I like to think I'm living the best life I can possibly live, right? Because why else wouldn't I be? Like,
Yeah, why not?
what would I do outside of that?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a fair point. And it's interesting because it does bring up some of the subtleties of human communication. The fact that we can have maybe messages behind the message, and when we talk, our friends, our computer friends, the artificial intelligences
Soon to
that
be
we
our
interact
bosses
with,
and our overlords.
perhaps they'll be our overlords. Yes, they are not better than us at everything.
Yes.
And yet. And one of the things that they are not better than us at just yet is creativity. And we wanted to have a show today to talk about that. Maybe have a little back and forth. Maybe a healthy exchange of perspectives is always a good idea for a show.
Are you picking up that I'm going to be on the opposing side already? Are you picking it up? Are you picking up what I'm dropping?
If assuming there are two sides, I would imagine you'll be on the opposing one. So yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down. And there's some interesting articles. There's a Fast Company article about how soon we can expect AI to pick up on some of the more creative aspects of human problem solving and cognition and thought. So like that's an interesting context if you're talking about the future of work, because AI is going to get better at some things. It's going to take longer to catch up in other areas, and that's sort of a good area for us to lean into as humans, because we're going to have an edge, and arguably we could get better. So that's one aspect to it. And then there's this other article we wanted to talk about an Oregon futurist, which is that's just a nice phrase. Like there's an Oregon futurist named Steve Brown, who wrote an interesting article to suggest that in the next 10 years, we're going to see more changes, more innovation than we've seen in the last 40. So I think the idea for the show is let's look at a longer view, let's say over the next 10 years or so. So we're entering the 2020s. If we're thinking by 2030-ish,
yes,
what will work be like? What kind of changes are going to happen? And then if we're trying to play with our heads up, think about where the humans will probably have the most relevant impact on the future of work and jobs and careers. What are we kind of leaning into? What are we expecting over the next 10 years? I think there's a lot to talk about. We wanted to make sure we credited the authors of these articles, right? So Melissa, you want to start?
Yeah, so I will start with the Oregon futurist. We're talking about Steve Brown, but the author who did that article was Tim Gordon, and then the other article, the article from Fast Company was done by two professors, and I'm gonna let you take it away.
Hopefully, we're very respectful of their work. We like making citations. I may not pronounce their names correctly, so there is a caveat. So this is by Tim Schwiesfurth and Rene Goduscheit. So I'm hopefully got that loosely correct, and then we can proceed. So Melissa, if you're thinking about future, I think the top line idea for this show is the future of work and human creativity is what we wanted to talk about. And using these two articles, the idea that next 10 years we're going to see more change and innovation than in the previous 40, and the other saying that there are some places where human creativity will likely stay ahead of what AI and machine learning will be able to do. Where do you want to go with this topic?
Well, I'll start by saying, right, because I think this is a good framing point. So Steve, like his point is this, right? Like there's 6 main technologies that are going to change, that are going to influence the way we work, right? And his points are artificial intelligence, which ties back into the creativity that we're talking about, blockchain technology, the Internet of Things and sensors, 5G networks and satellite networks, autonomous machines, and then ultimately augmented reality, right?
Right.
And I think like we've covered those topics, each of those topics on the show before, and I think he's right? And the question is, as those technologies get more prevalent, they all exist now. Not one of those technologies are not there, right? And you can see them getting better. And I think as those technologies come in, you can see where artificial intelligence in particular will start to do a lot of the tasks that the lower level tasks that humans currently do now, which does, in my mind, free up the human to do much more creative work, much more challenging work, much more engaging work. Like I work in finance, as you all know, and one of the things I've said, interestingly enough, is that is the goal, right? You can automate yourself out of a lot of the routine tasks that makes the finance job so like taxing around month end or around like close. And this is what you want to do, right? This is what you want to do. You want to be able to automate those tasks out of the way so that that you can be working on more high level things like what's the strategy of the business, or where what direction should we be going. And I think even things like forecasting, which are typically considered high level tasks right now for finance folks, are things that will be automated with artificial intelligence. And they'll probably do a task like that better than us because they can consume a lot more data points than we can. So that's my opening thoughts on it. Curious what yours are.
Yeah, just kind of building on where you were going there too. Like, I think throughout all of this, trying to understand how the way the humans interact with the developing technology is the thing that I keep returning to. So like even in the example of, AI, machine learning, getting better at financial forecasts, like I would think the human interaction with that would be to give feedback on the models, to be more exploratory around, bringing in different data sets. Like what humans can do better than AI right now is empathize, particularly with other humans. But I think there's an element to which I think humans can empathize with AI to understand where is artificial intelligence better. Be humble about your empathy. Don't think of it as subservient to you. It's just a different kind of intelligence. And then like if you get a macro view that has a system in which there's humans and there's artificial agents, what expertise, what ways of thinking, what mindsets will the humans need to have to make the most out of AI? Like I think of it even like some people are just better at using the internet. They're better at searching in Google. And arguably those people are already sort of developing these new economy skills in like sort of a proto form. And, it's that whole notion of the centaur that like, if you can blend human intelligence with artificial intelligence, the net benefit it's like exponential. It's more than just the additive combination of the two. It's at least multiplicative. There's some force multiplier there when you combine the complementary aspects of artificial intelligence with the things that humans are going to be better at.
Yeah, I mean, I can take this conversation so many different ways. The thing I would say, right, in the short term, right, like it's going to be a transition. So we're talking about where you're going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But in the interim, to the companies that will succeed, the work that will change are the companies who have employees that are sitting in this organization going, like, we're not trying to automate folks out of their jobs. For sure, some people will lose their jobs, but the reality of the situation is like you're automating yourself out of lower level tasks that you can then free up your creativity. And the skill sets that will survive are the people who embrace that change and push that change forward and are also learning ahead of it. Because I will say this, right, and this is the other side of my brain speaking, like financial forecasting, like as I brought up this topic, happens, like there are sophisticated forecasting tools right now in stock market changes and stuff like that. And what you realize, right, is those tools are pretty cool. They're pretty accurate in forecasting, but what it does allow for is when you put those things in place, human arbitrage becomes so much easier because humans can really cause friction into those systems, and they can screw it up for the good, or they can make money on it for a while, but they can also really cause catastrophic changes and catastrophic problems in the system. And that's what you got to realize, right? Like you can't just let a computer go wild right now. we can talk to me about 50 years from now, what I think they may be able to do. But right now, I don't think you can let a computer go like without human intervention or without human oversight, because they're still a little too dumb not to pick on my computer veterans right now. That will be my boss in 5 years.
Well, and they're also only as smart as the data that they're fed.
Yes.
And generally the data that is fed to them hopefully it's fed to them by humans. Sometimes the humans allow an algorithm to sort of grab its own data. But even then, like understanding that when you're limited in the inputs that you are training off of, there will be biases in the artificial intelligence that is created. It's like when Twitter was training its bot based on Twitter, it turned into like a racist, xenophobic troll.
Yes.
And that's because it was fed Twitter data. So, you know, garbage in, garbage out, you know, and there's a level of sophistication that I think it's important to challenge humans that's why I think the narrative of the robot overlords is actually dangerous, because there is a tendency towards laziness and taking advantage of convenience rather than forcing yourself to kind of lean into flexible thinking and like rapid like learning acquisition, which is kind of the new normal, you know? And if you don't accept that, and if you just say the algorithm told me this, I do think that accelerates a path. The RB danger, the RB dragons.
I feel you're gonna rebel against the robot overlords. I'm not there with you, Mike. They definitely know better than me 40 years from now. But but you are. That is a valid point, right? And you brought up a really important point, and I don't want to diminish it. Like when we train these, it is garbage in, garbage out, right? When you are training these artificial intelligence tools and to learn, it is dangerous. Like we've seen it, one of the best applications for something like this is like in helping in the recruiting process, right? Helping to figure out how, like, what person will this person succeed in the company or not. And the challenge with that, right, is you're training it on the data it has right now, and the data it has right now tends to be biased. So I think that is when I caution probably in 10 years, you're probably still, you need to have oversight, and you need to be willing to, you need somebody who is not just blindly listening to the computer, because if you are blindly listening to the computer, you probably are not going to be one of the successful ones.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point also, in that it does tie to the creativity article, in that humans are better at making novel connections and are also more broad. You know, there's the whole concept of humans have a much broader, more generalized intelligence, and then artificial intelligence, at least currently, has a much deeper, highly specialized intelligence. So like they will actually master things like chess, but they won't necessarily, you know how to navigate a city or walk into a novel social context and interact in a way that is semi-graceful. You know, like those are things that are, you know, we have millions of years of what I would call evolution that has made sort of refined our data and our sort of algorithms. And then the underlying idea is, you know, being able to respond to novelty and being resourceful in those contexts is sort of that's sort of built into our operating system as humans. At least as far as I understand thus far, that's not really the approach that's being taken to design artificial intelligence, because it's too difficult to even get enough deep data in that narrow area. It takes a lot of focus and work getting that big data set, and then to be able to sort of amass all those different cross-sectional data sets and then design an intelligence that could respond to all of that. Today, and probably for the next 10 years at least, it's going to be too difficult for our current capabilities. But you kind of want to get in on the build though too. Like, so you don't want to say, that's why the people who head in their sands, Luddites, you know, kill your computer, like they're as much a problem as the people who are saying, I'm looking forward to our robot overlords, you know. But yeah. So, and then what were your thoughts on the Oregon futurist? Because I know you got some value out of that one. So I definitely wanted to. I just like the idea of talking about it. It's like Florida Man. Oregon futurist.
I mean, he has inspired me a little bit. I'll tell you the interesting thing he brought up in this article that I really like, that it sparked a lot for me. Yeah, we're talking about the Internet of Things, talking about sensors and how more prevalent they're going to come. It's gonna change the way healthcare happens, right?
Yep.
For sure, right? There's so much input coming in now on your body and your body responses. Like I may have a problem. We can talk through this later. But like, so I now own, like, clearly I've always had a blood pressure machine in my house. I now have one that's tied into my phone that's feeding the data into my phone, and so I'm tracking it on a regular basis. Like, I'm tracking my heart rate and my breathing from my watch. I also now, though, recently bought, because I was convinced that my stress level was too high and that I was going to have a heart attack. So I now have a small, very tiny handheld EKG machine that
oh my God,
that is like, will literally allow me to test 6 points, like the 6 pressure points of whether my heart is having an irregular machine or not. You joke.
No, I laugh. You're honest. I just laugh. Yeah.
You laugh. Like, it is. I may have a problem. Everyone has heard me say I may have a problem. But what I think is very interesting about that, and the company who built it, and we'll see how successful they get or not, they allow you to email those results to your doctor. Mm-hmm. And they're at least giving you, like, your normal, this is a problem or not. And mm-hmm. I think that kind of data in the hands of people who are probably a little less unhealthy than I actually am, but thinking I'm having a heart attack, will actually be incredibly useful. Now, I'll give the flip side of the danger of this right now, right? And which is why I'm trying not to be crazy. It could be giving me a false positive, all right? I could actually have a problem, and I'm using this machine and it's not actually highlighting that problem. And so it's giving me, it's allowing me to a peace of mind because I'm a hypochondriac that I may not need. So I think
it's totally interesting. And it just sort of building on that, like, one thing, it's not like a technology, it's more like a mindset, but like design thinking and, user experience design is getting, like, that's a revolution that's happening that I think is sometimes, it's understated how prevalent it's been and how much it's going to inform the next 10 years as an example. But like, I think what I would expect in the next 10 years in the context you're talking about, like being creative about healthcare innovation, super smart, being ready to experiment with it, particularly like if you want to plug into your own healthcare and you can find a way to do that, also super smart. But the thing that I think will happen in terms of the evolution of this technology in the next 10 years is that the feedback's going to be smarter and subtler. And so that only when you hit certain thresholds that you probably can control will stuff even sort of register. And this is where I think augmented reality does come in. It's almost like, whether it's visual or some sort of auditory thing or some sort of, subtle haptic, like you feel a vibration or something. And and then you can train yourself to adjust your tactics based on those subtle forms of feedback. Because I think the problem with feedback now is that there's too much of an opportunity cost on your cognitive load, so that, for me, I don't like monitoring my blood pressure because it makes my blood pressure go up. I get stressed when analyzed in that way. And, I think for people who get in their head around this type of medical feedback, being able to sort of like dampen it. It's kind of like the way I feel about social media too. Like, I've shut off my notifications so that when I need to consult with these things, I can, but like have some intentionality about how you get that kind of feedback from the AI in these environments that we're all going to be living.
And I'll tell you, and there are different people in this world. I see two ways, I'm sure there are more, but there are two ways I see this can go as well. So one, like, I actually forget giving me the feedback, right? So like diabetics, right? Like pricking your finger, and like when you're diabetic, you're required to test it all the time, and you're keeping track of it in some way, right? Why am I keeping track of it? Why am I not just sending it straight back into my doctor's system, and they're monitoring it and they're getting the flags because they can read the data better than I can? Like my 125 is that high for I have no idea. Like, you figure it out, right? And I think that is where, like, talking about the future of how work changes in healthcare, Imagine a world where I don't have to go sit in a room for 6
Right.
hours taking tests. I am
Right.
constantly, all my information is constantly being kept. And then when I go in to see my doctor, it's much more proactive. That's one way it can work. The second area, and I think it is, I don't believe I should have high blood pressure. Therefore, it must be something I'm doing, right? Like, I don't believe, as others may suggest differently, I believe it's something I'm doing. So I literally use that machine in a way to figure out if by doing breathing exercises or by doing like yoga, I am reducing it. And it was the way I figured out, like, if I drink more water, my blood pressure goes down. So whenever my blood pressure spikes, I make sure I'm taking in enough water in a day.
Right.
And then I checked on the internet. That's what you figure out, right? Like, you figure out that these things can happen. And so I do it when I'm running. I use my watch to give me clues that my heart rate is too high or my breathing is too high. And I think that it helps motivate certain people into a much more healthier lifestyle. It's only if you get obsessive do I think it becomes a problem, or only if it's having a counter reaction. So
I mean, and I don't think it's that I don't think I'm that different. Like, my point is more the amount of work required to get that feedback seamlessly and to figure out behaviorally what kind of changes you could do. I think that's getting back to creativity in healthcare and future of work. Like, user experience designers who are thinking about how to give good behavioral healthcare recommendations around exercise, movement, hydration, nutrition, mindfulness, the list goes on and on. That's why, like, those apps are the beginning of a macro trend that I think everyone will be, like, the marketplace will refine those things, at a consumer level. And then I'm not sure how healthcare, like, there's going to be so much investment in healthcare, but there's also so much up in the air around whether the investment is in, like, novel insurance practices or, like, new technologies that'll be incorporated in a way that are actually, designed truly in support of the health of patients. I'm not sure about that, but I think on the individual consumer side, when you think about the technologies that we outlined here, I think there will be some cutting edge stuff that we're all going to want to opt into. And I think opting into it is going to be less intrusive because these things are going to, I think, become more human designed,
Yeah, no, I agree. And the only question I have, right, and we've touched this topic before, right, is who gets to own this data, right? Because right now it's either Samsung owns the data, or like the Apple owns it, or Google owns it. And none of those people, like, I trust Google with my tell me where I'm going and stuff like that. I'm not sure yet I trust Google with my healthcare data, because that's a much more personal, and if you F it up, like, I'm pretty screwed. But I think that's the path that we have to go down, right? I will also say another thing, because you hit on this topic. There is waste in healthcare, right? And there's inefficiency in the way we work, and the costs are rising. I think it's important. This is an important topic to get right. Like, where do you place the investments? Like, do you put it back into those practices? Do you put it back into, like, reducing costs in the hospital, or do you just leapfrog that and realize that there is a better way to take the cost out by using these technologies and these sensory technologies ahead of time, right? And I'm not saying I'm an expert or a professor. I'm just saying that's what I'm always nervous about, the people who set the agenda for these things, because they tend to be Luddites right now, and that's the challenge.
Right. And what they really need to be are smart humans who understand how to be creative while leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning in interesting ways. And then they'll have to think ahead to things like the blockchain, things like the Internet of Things, 5G. But the high level idea that, like, the next 10 years are going to see this rapid, acceleration of innovation, I'm somewhat hopeful about that. I would prefer to live in that reality than alternatives. And then it speaks back to just being flexible and adaptable in your modes, regardless of your background, your age, your own personal history. Like, those things can be learned, like, you can get better at being a flexible thinker and adjusting to change and adopting new technology,
Yes, I agree. The last thing I would mention, because it also came up, and I think it's an important point that underscores all this, 5G and the rise of 5G and satellites, it will make it also that this is not just available for like the US and China and a handful of countries. This will allow it to go into like Africa, like the Africa and to Indonesia and to Cambodia and to places where traditionally good fast internet has not been there, and these sensory things are not being there, and this information has not been there. This is going to also revolutionize the way work happens in those places too, which is where I think the next booms of the economy and the global economy will come from.
Definitely interesting stuff.
Yeah,
so we could go on,
yes,
but we won't. And this was a good conversation. We'll continue to have these types of conversations. If you don't subscribe to Trending in Education, why don't you? Please do so. And we'll be back on the regular. Tell your friends, tell people you just kind of know, tell everybody. And yeah, we'll be back again soon on Trending in Education.